Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Two Way. Grateful to you for joining. As always, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on the Two Way platform, eager for you to participate. If you're going to participate in the chat or speak up, please do it in a way that's consistent with the values and ethos of this platform. This is for learning and for people to understand each other across the political spectrum. It's not for shouts or insults, and it's not for the kind of vulgar scatological language that sometimes shows up in the chat, which I normally don't see, but my colleagues do. And boy, the summaries are awesome. If you want to participate and you're here in the two-way platform, please raise your hand. We'd love to get people in who haven't spoken before. And we're going to talk about primarily about three stories, all of which, when we started today and when we scheduled this session, we thought would be pretty ripe for a lot of discussion. Only one of which is really truly ripe to discuss. And we've got a great group of folks to do that, which is the economy. One of my father's best jokes is there are only two people understand how the international economic system works, and unfortunately they disagree. And that almost always pertains when we're talking about why there's been a stock market crash or crashes around the globe. So we've got three great folks to try to help us understand what's going on there. In terms of Iran and what many journalists had been led to believe, both publicly and privately, would be a potential attack on Israel today. As far as I know, that did not happen, at least not yet. So we'll continue to monitor that as we're visiting together. But that story continues to be an important one. But the ball continues to appear to be in the Iranians' court and their allies, and the developments there still expected by the American government, by the Israelis, but has not happened. On sweepstakes, Reuters reported during the afternoon that it was down to Governor Shapiro, Governor Walz, largely consistent with what I've been told for a while, although there was a little bit of a flurry about Senator Kelly over the weekend. If I take all my reporting from what I've been told and look at the body language and the literal words, it still seems to point towards Governor Shapiro. But as we discussed here last night, that pick is now at best high risk and high reward, and maybe has moved out of the do no harm zone. I want to show you two sweepstakes things off of Twitter. One, the great political reporter, Chris LaCivita, who also in his spare time helps run the Trump campaign. He tweeted this moments ago, breaking news, according to my sources, Kamala Harris is not picking Josh Shapiro. Maybe Chris is right. But I found that humorous. Now, we talked here last night about and just to be clear, I've not seen anybody in the last 24 hours report anything decisively about who it's going to be. Although, again, Reuters reported down to those two. We talked last night about the failure of Governor Shapiro's team to play any defense on him on the various attacks he's faced. You can take the tweet down. And again, there's a half dozen topics that have come up that if you were the Harris campaign might give you pause to say, is this still a pick that's safe to pick? And there was an incredible tweet today that laid out all of the pro-Israel, pro-Netanyahu ties of one of the V prospects to kind of paint a picture of someone who's very pro-Israel and out of step with the progressive wing of the party. That person was not Governor Shapiro, it was Governor Walz. And that tweet contained this picture. Put the picture up, please. There you go. That looks like two chummy pals. The point is, if you look at the statements from Governor Walz about Israel, about his work with AIPAC, he certainly seems out of step with the progressive wing of the party, maybe more in some ways than Governor Shapiro. And yet Governor Shapiro is the one who's been painted in this broad way. So there could be sweepstakes news while we're on. As always, eager for anyone who sees any sweepstakes news to put it in the chat or raise your hand, your physical hand vociferously, and we'll love to get you in to help. I'm a great multitasker, and I've got a bunch of screens going here, but I could miss something. So if you see some news development, either on Israel or on sweepstakes, please let me know. Now, to the question of the economy. We saw over the weekend and into today, one day around the world, markets in Japan and elsewhere having real big losses here. And I always delight in reading the economic press to try to understand, and they always sound to me more like palm readers and Ouija board experts rather than rigorous analysis of what's going on. But we have three people here who don't use Ouija boards who are excellent to talk about. So if you guys could go ahead and pin and bring in our three guests, Sarah Bianchi, who worked for President Obama and for President Biden and other Democrats, many other Democrats. David Bahnsen, who's managing partner and founder of the Bahnsen Group, and Jimmy Hart, who, hi, Sarah. Jimmy Hart, who had involved in some of the early pilots on two-way, and delighted to have Jimmy back to share his thoughts about the economy. And Jimmy is retired as the president of the Metal Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. I think of him as a Brooklyn plumber with a lot of common sense, because he is that too. So let's get Jimmy in as well here, and David, and we're going to have like a nice four-way conversation. And I want to start with just your basic broad sense of what happened. What caused this? Was it, as people initially said, because of the concern about employment in the U.S., or was it caused by something else? So Sarah, you first, and then David, and then hopefully Jimmy will wander back in. Sarah, what's your view of why what happened?
Yeah, I think thanks, Mark, and great to be here and really enjoy the platform. I think it was a combination of things for the markets today. First of all, the markets have been a little bit frothy on the promise of AI anyway. And second, I do think very disappointed with the employment report on Friday for sure, and where the landing will come in, and whether the a Fed is too late to the party here. And I think there'll be a lot of interest going into the Jackson Hole speech at the end of the month from Powell and the like. But also there was this the Bank of Japan did raise a rates today, and there was a big yen yen trade that had to unwind. And so I think it was just kind of a combination of things. I think there is a difference, of course, between the financial markets and the real economy. And so I think Donald Trump, calling this a Kamala recession or Kamala crash, probably a bit premature. I think we will see the Fed come in pretty quick in September, and perhaps in the months following. In some ways, that could feel good to voters as they start to see. We already saw the 10-year come down, so as they start to see some of these interest rates come down. So I think it's a little quick to say what is what the economy is going to do, how soft the landing will be, and what it means for the campaign. Probably premature.
Sarah, that's great. Just let me ask you about the frothy for amateurs on this conversation. When you say frothy, what do you mean?
The market's just, it's been very favorable this year. It's really been driven by the Fed, but also around stocks like Nvidia and the kind of promise of technology and AI. And there are some experts who thought it was a bit ahead of itself. And
so what today would represent is a correction of some over exuberance back to where the level should be.
Back to where the level should be. I think that there's a confluence of all three of these things. We don't really know which one yet is dominant. But there is no question that some of the economic concerns about Friday and where the Fed would land, and whether they were a little late here, that definitely was one of the factors. No question.
Okay. Thank you for that. Stay with us. David, agree, disagree, annotate. What do you think of Sarah's explanation?
No, I largely agree, but I'd kind of organize it a little differently. I think there's three broad categories she brought up. They're the three categories, more or less, that I wrote about to our clients a couple hours ago. If you're talking about today's market sell-off, there's no question, far and away, number one is the unwind of the yen carry trade in Japan. You do not get a 12.5% drop in the Nikkei because somebody doesn't like Kamala Harris. Okay, there is no doubt that there was a technical issue of the yen being borrowed excessively to leverage financial trades. The yen rallied significantly the last 5 days. This wasn't something that just happened today. And that created a real financial disruption over the weekend. Taiwan dropped a lot, and then it carried over into American markets today. But number two is not totally separate, Mark, on the Venn diagram. This overvaluation, first of all, it didn't come anywhere close to revaluing down to a reasonable level. Nvidia is now down almost 30% from its high, and it is still trading at 60 times earnings. It is trading at 30 times revenues. Apple was down significantly. It ended up closing less down than it had opened this morning, but still you have Google, Microsoft, some of these big companies that were formerly called Mag 7 that are repricing out of just preposterous valuations. And then I think third is the other point you brought up, the just general skepticism about American economic strength. I think market actors were largely wrong in forecasting a 2023 recession out of the 2022 Fed tightening. And now there's a concern that maybe it's been punted into 25. It doesn't require a recession, meaning 2 quarters of consecutive contraction, to have a big impact, because the markets had priced in 13% profit growth next year. And you are not going to get that if you have some downward movement in economic strength. The jobs report was a part of it. There had been some weakness in ISM, although the ISM services number today came out and it was actually positive, but the last couple months had been negative. There's a mixed bag of economic data. None of it is great, but none of it is screaming that there's an imminent recession. And so I think those 3 factors played in today, but the only broader narrative I want to point out is that the NASDAQ is down 13.5% from where it was almost 4 weeks ago. So this isn't a 1-day or 3-day deal. The NASDAQ had already been correcting. The S&P is down 8.5%. That's not great, but it's not even a correction yet, let alone a bear market. And yet things still seem frothy in price. So there's plenty of reason to think it could get worse from here. I do have a quick political comment, Mark, on this. I've always thought the year 2000 is fascinating in markets relative to that election. And I have very rarely seen it discussed. The budget was balanced. The economy was good. It was 5% real GDP growth. The NASDAQ dropped 50%. The Dow was up on the year, double digits, but the NASDAQ got killed. And I've never believed that that didn't cost Gore 527 votes in Florida.
Right.
I mean, even if it's only marginal, if a number of us believe this is going to be a marginally determined election, I think all of these things do matter. I'm a lifetime conservative Republican who has never voted for President Trump and is not going to this year. And I thought his tweets today about putting this as a Kamala crash were preposterous. But I think they were totally fair game politically, and everybody would do it. Every politician takes credit for markets they don't deserve, and they all give blame for markets that shouldn't get blamed. And so this is going to be interesting.
Right. All right. Before Sarah says it, I'll say more people went to the polls in Florida intending to vote for Al Gore than went to the polls intending to vote for George Bush. So he really would have won Florida anyway if they hadn't had that butterfly ballot. So you've talked about today. I'd love for you guys to just colloquy a bit on between now and November, or really maybe October when early voting starts. If you're the Harris campaign, leaving aside political blame, but actual facts on the ground, thinking about what the Fed might do, thinking about how markets are going to, how real companies might react to today, is there peril for her that things could get worse based on both today as a cause and an effect?
I mean, right now, Kamala Harris, is in the unenviable position of nothing really seems to be sticking to her. So inflation challenges and things that people were so frustrated about with Biden just, weeks ago, to date, that she has closed the gap, or certainly narrowed the gap on the economy for no real apparent reason. It's all feeding it, this momentum and excitement seemed to be overcoming that. That being said, yes, and yes, of course you worry about this stuff.
But paint the most negative, realistic picture of what could happen in terms of government stats or just company actions.
Look, every time you're in the White House, you hold your breath before every jobs report. You hold your breath before pretty much a lot of economic numbers. You don't want to, we don't, how much is unemployment ticking up? They watch inflation, right? All of these numbers, you're holding your breath, and particularly as you get close to the election. Now, you guys are smarter than me about exactly at what point the voters are pricing it in, but market volatility, people's 401ks down, all of that stuff is not helpful. And she may want to look at, I thought already she should look at a few business tax cuts, or saying she was for the stuff that the Senate passed down for her own kind of just political, but that becomes a more important, a rate cut, or the 10-year yield come. If people start to feel mortgage rates, they are frustrated with that helps a little bit. But by and large, you are voting for a no economic volatility, and because it's only going to really probably go downward in the next couple of months. What can she do? I think at some point she probably does have to come out with a, hopefully somewhat centrist economic speech. Telling people, I mean, she does need to pass that test of, can I be an economic steward to the country? And am I, do I kind of get business and all of those things, and counter, the California liberal? That's what I would do. But
if you were writing the policy, what would the elements of that be?
Well, I do think there's something in well, first of all, on the border, I would just do that for just go to the center of the border for whatever. But on the economics, I think there's probably some of the tax cuts that the Senate failed to pass last.
That are into individuals or business, or both?
For business, the ones that were expiring that passed. Didn't pass the Senate. She could come out and say that should be a part of it. I think something to show expensing or R&D, or really, it almost doesn't matter what, like people, it's more just the notion that she's going to be somewhat business friendly, somewhat market friendly, I think would help her. And then also, of course, given the states that she's up in, there's never any harm in being a little bit tough on China. So finding a place on export controls or wherever else that she would be tough, I do think is always a helpful, some combination of that. But I think mostly she's wanting to signal to people that she is going to be a good steward of the economy, maybe not make some of the mistakes that people perceive Biden to have made, but mostly that she's business friendly. That's what I would go for.
David, what do you think about the two questions? What peril does she have, and what could she propose?
I really do mean this, Mark, nonpartisan and charitably, but I'm pretty serious about the answer. I think she has a huge peril in trying to explain things that she doesn't understand. And the basement strategy is a brilliant one for her. And if she comes out and has to start talking about monetary policy or the yen carry trade, and she wouldn't get into that granularity, but there's a risk in her touching markets and economic detail where I think it could unwind this momentum. I don't think they'll let her do that. I don't think they should. I think it has to be platitudes, tough on China, we're going to fix the border, other nonsensical things that aren't attached to any specificity, because I think she has a big risk in trying to get into specificity here. She hasn't done well trying to get into the details of some of these things. There's clips that are out there of her talking about AI, talking about digital storage that are just frightening to listen to. And I think in this case, less is more for her. And yet it's very unlikely that she can get away with that if the economy is worsening, if there's more data coming out. Having to explain the CHIPS Act and why we gave Intel $8.5 billion to fire 15,000 people last week. These are part of the things that are being hung as part of President Biden's resume. It was passed bipartisan. There's a lot of new right people that like that corporate welfare, but that was a terrible headline, and it's all true. So those are the things that I think her engaging in this economic discussion, she risks having to explain and defend, and I don't think she would end up having to do that very well. There's nothing that the Fed can really do to hurt or help her at this point. I think those things are largely baked in. There's plenty the Fed can do that hurts or helps the reality on the ground into 2025, but these narratives are mostly baked in. And so I think she has asymmetrical risk reward. In a funny way, Sarah brought up the bond yields, and I don't agree that if the 10 years lower, it's a good opportunity, because there's no way those rates are going lower unless it's because of significantly lower expectations for growth, which is, I think, what will happen. And there's not enough time for mortgage borrowers to benefit from it. The lag effect is going to go well past the election. And lowering bond yields at this point is really going to reflect expectations for declining economic growth. That's not going to be a positive story, but nor is it one I'd expect her to be able to fully unpack or explain. I'd be very curious for her to answer what economic team she wanted to bring on. I think markets, I think a lot of centrist and independents, for whatever reason, like hearing the names Larry Summers and Furman and some of these, old kind of Clinton, Obama alumni. She would have to kind of separate herself from some of Team Biden economically. I very much doubt she's going to be willing to do it. And I don't know that there is a real coherent economic philosophy that is yet attached to personnel. And so that she's better off avoiding that subject.
David, before I let Sarah respond, because I think she wants to respond to at least one thing you said, just to clarify and remembering our peace, love, and understanding sensibility here, are you saying she's not articulate about the economy, or you have reason to believe that she's not knowledgeable about the economy?
No, I take the peace, love, and understanding very seriously, and I would be more than happy to charitably say that it may just be a communication or rhetorical problem more than substantive. I don't know enough to say either way.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to comment on that? Then I want to ask you both a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I don't think she needs to sit down and go on a CNBC and take a long standing interview. She just needs to give a speech and lay out and try to try to provide some reassurance. She doesn't need to certainly talk about the yen trade, but the reality is the Trump economic policy for term 2, which the market's more looking backwards right now at Trump and what he did in term 1 with a big tax cut. But there are reasonable people saying it's quite inflationary to do the inflation. So I think she just needs to set her agenda. Look, I don't think Kamala Harris needs to beat Donald Trump on the economy to win this election. She needs to close the gap as best she can, which she's already done somehow just by being the pick. And then drive on her other advantages like choice in healthcare.
Yeah. Jimmy, welcome. I want to bring you in just a minute, but I want to ask the others one more question. You both referenced China. You both referenced the Fed. You both, I think, referenced the notion of distancing herself from the administration in which she serves. But one recommendation people have made, and again, Sarah, you referenced this, is go rhetorically tougher on China than would be responsible for a president to do. But just, basically tell the Chinese will get the joke. Just be super tough. Find some just populist anti-Chinese positions to take and call on the Fed more aggressively than an administration would do. Disregard the deference to the Fed and just call for the Fed to cut interest rates. Would that be sensible, economic/political strategy?
In my own view, she probably Democrats, even in campaigns, tend to stay away from, and most Republicans historically too, tend to stay away from jawboning the Fed. Certainly she could go that direction, but I am guessing, my base case is that she could. But I think certainly being tough on China, I don't think Biden has been, kind of put all the pieces together and, delivered kind of a coherent theory of the case. She is more flexible there. She should do a set of, I would just do a set of economic policies, that are designed to split slightly, fill in a little bit of the blank position that she has on the economy. I think she could mostly accomplish it there.
Okay. David, anything on that?
Yeah, Mark, I think that the jawboning of the Fed would be a terrible idea, both substantively and politically. The Fed is going to take about 100 basis points out of the Fed funds rate by the end of the year. That's what the Fed funds futures market is telling us. 50 coming in September. There's no reason for her to go jawbone, and it takes away a criticism they can rightly use against President Trump. that he jawboned the Fed, and it's a threat to the independence of the institution. So for her to do that has no upside and some downside. On the China thing, I think it would be a really interesting thing for her to talk about the threat of Trump's tariffs and have some reporter, just one on God's green earth, ask her what tariff her and Biden lowered from the Trump years. Just one.
Yeah.
Because they didn't lower any.
Yeah. They sing
But
from
they're
the
not
same.
talking about a 10% across the board tariff on every import or a 60% on China.
I think
Not yet.
that's very true, and luckily I don't think Trump is ever going to really do it. But my point is more political, Sarah, that I don't think she can go after Trump's tariffs and face the question as to why they didn't undo any of the tariffs in 4 years. That's all.
Yeah, because they're neither wants to be out hot. Noah, if you could put up the tweet I just sent, we may have a little news on deep stakes from a guy named Dan Green, whose Twitter profile says he's a communicator, organizer, Minneapolis hype man. Tweets are mostly about inclusive campaign messaging and how we can bring people together. So that's the photo from the tweet. And the tweet says, I'm live outside of the Tim Walz residence. A bunch of black Suburbans rolled in. Secret Service? No idea. Lots of people going in and out. So just based on past being prologue, if that's an accurate photo, and I don't know anything about this guy, but he's got 2,000 followers, so he must be as good a reporter as Chris LaCivita. Maybe we're about to look at Tim Walz headed to Philadelphia to be on the ticket. We'll keep following that. Somebody monitor Mr. Green's account. Jimmy Hart, welcome. How's retirement going, first of all?
My apologies for the technology problems.
That's all right. You're a plumber, not a mechanic, not a tech support. Jimmy, first of all, how's retirement going?
Exciting. Family time is the best time.
Yeah. Have you saved enough to deal with the Biden-Harris inflation? Kids, your presents for the grandkids are super expensive now, more than they were under Donald Trump.
The system is broken.
Yeah. Jimmy, you were supporting Biden, now you're supporting Harris, I assume, right?
Yes, I am.
So the House of Labor, I'll make you the spokesperson for the entire House of Labor. Joe Biden, long history, Northeast Democrat, long history of relationships. She has fewer. Are people just as enthusiastic about her or more enthusiastic? What's your general sense of how the movement feels about her in this swap?
I feel that the enthusiasm has just shifted from Joe Biden to Vice President Harris. And very interesting is our younger members are very energized. And there was a little bit of a gap there prior to the president stepping down.
Yeah. When you think about her, if she called you and said, Jimmy, I want to, Sarah says, I only need to close the gap on the economy, but by election day, I want to be rated better on the economy than Donald Trump. What would you advise her to do?
Well, I tell her to keep the Biden economic policies going. Okay, create good paying jobs. The best way to beat inflation is with good paying jobs. And the Biden record, when it comes to real wages for people who can bargain and represent themselves, is astounding. I mean, collective bargaining agreements are through the roof. Union membership is through the roof. And with that comes increased wages. And they are much better able to weather the inflationary prices that we've been dealing with due to the pandemic and the way the economy was handled during that pandemic.
Do you think that trading Harris in and Biden out increased the Democrats' chances of winning the election?
I think President Biden was going to be reelected. I just think it's a different type of a race right now. Contrast is everything. The Biden administration, politically had a lot more work to do in the contrast arena, but the contrast between Harris and Trump is amazing, not only politically, but, physically, you name it.
And in terms of the vice presidential selection, Bernie Sanders is for Governor Walz. There some labor unions have not been in support of Governor Shapiro. Do you have a preference there? And if so, which one and why?
Well, I've been fortunate to work and know them both, and either one of them will be a fine choice. They come with their Achilles heel to labor in some cases, but again, we're voting for the president of the United States, and we're hoping he's going to pick somebody that's going to be able that at a moment's notice step up to the plate and take over the country in a time of need. So either one of them would be fine.
Okay. Tell us about your work with Governor Walz. What did it consist of, and what were your impressions of it?
You know, he understood licensing, which is very important for skilled labor. And his policies in the state of Minnesota, okay, promoted good paying jobs in the construction industry. He's been a true supporter through time immemorial.
And did you deal with him when he was in the House, or just when he was governor?
No, as governor and in the House.
Yeah. And is he an intellectual guy? Is he a fun guy? What's he like?
He's a knockaround guy. You know what I mean? He's prone to an off the cuff remark every once in a while, and you know, he's the kind of guy that back in the old days you want to have a beer with.
Okay. And about Governor Shapiro, tell us about your dealings with him and what's he like?
Amazing guy. I mean, I've watched him in Pennsylvania. He's a pragmatist. You know, he came to the office with his positions. He looks at positions. He makes changes. He's very smart, and he's very loyal to working families.
All right, Jimmy, I have one more for you, and then we're going to open it up, start bringing folks in. Raise your hand. I'd love if folks had questions about the economy for these three great people. If you want to ask about other stuff, you can, but let's focus on the economy first, if possible. Jimmy, you extol the record of President Biden. You said you thought he'd be reelected. You also know that the polling shows a gap, that people think that the Biden presidency was not as good for them as compared to the Trump presidency, and that the next 4 years they say would have been better under Trump than Biden. And now they say by a smaller margin, but they still say more Americans say Trump would be better. What accounts for that gap? If you're confident about the Biden record and the Biden policies, why do more Americans think Trump was better for the economy?
I mean, listen, the age issue, you know, the Trump administration did an excellent job of making age an issue. And as you can see, now that age is not the issue, Kamala Harris has surpassed Biden, and all of their support levels have risen throughout the country. And she's on a wonderful roll. And at the end of the day, she's going to prevail because one, her policies are right, and two, she's energetic to do the job.
Okay, thank you. All three of you, so grateful to you for coming. Let's bring some folks in to ask you some questions. And let's start with Maura. Maura, if you could unmute. Again, if you want to ask about something besides the economy, you can, but I would take the opportunity to ask these three genius folks any question you have about the economy. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I don't have a question. I just like kind of wanted to share my opinion about something.
Sure.
I just would like to say I'm 26, kind of in like the graduate education space. So this is kind of where my frustration is coming from. I'm not an expert on politics, but just kind of want to share a different opinion. I would say that I am like kind of frustrated with like the Democrats and like those who are in power right now. I feel like we're kind of gaslit on like all different aspects of our life, not just with like Biden and his decline, but with the economy. We're basically told that the unemployment rate is low, so we should all kind of just like agree that everything is okay, even though I don't think it is. Everything costs a lot of money. I have friends who have great college education but can't get a good job and are often getting laid off. So I don't see where the good economy is, and I don't understand why other young people aren't frustrated with what is happening, since I don't think things are in a great space right now. I don't know if things would be better with Trump, but I'm just not satisfied with how things are
Maura,
going right now.
we're all gonna ask you questions, so stand by. But first, tell us where are you? What state do you live in?
I'm in Jersey.
Yeah, and are you going to vote in the election?
I think so. I'm just like really unsure. Everyone says Trump is like or like Biden and Harris is like a protest vote for Trump, but like I can't believe I'm saying this. I might vote for him because of the like a protest from the Democrats and what life is like right now. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Sarah, how'd you find out about two-way?
I found you
I'm
guys
not
on
Sarah,
YouTube.
sorry.
No worries,
Sorry,
Maura.
Maura, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube.
YouTube. Okay.
Yeah.
Sarah, you want to ask Maura a question? You don't have to.
No, I hear the frustration. I think there is a lot of frustration, particularly of your generation, and there's a lot of high costs. You know, I would I guess just encourage you to look at the different platforms and what people want to do about it, because you know, there are big differences, and they do a matter in that regard.
Mara, if we had President Trump and Vice President Harris here, and you could ask them questions, what would you ask the two of them? Sorry, I need to unmute you. I apologize. Go ahead. Unmute and go ahead. What would you ask one or both of them?
I would just say for Trump, I think sometimes, and the Republicans in general, I think sometimes, I don't know if they like purpose, I don't know if it's definitely not on purpose, but I feel they just make themselves unelectable. I don't know JD Vance that much or that much about him, but I just think it kind of just made him a little less unelectable and could have just went with a more like non like create I don't know what the word for it, but maybe just like a less kind of polarizing person. So just like for the Trump campaign or for Republicans, like just like chill out a little bit and stop being so polarizing because I think the world kind of will get not like I think with things going on right now, it's not great that if they kind of just laid low, more people would maybe vote for them. But that's my
Great.
thoughts.
David, anything you want to say or ask?
Well, I feel the same about the Republicans making themselves more electable. I think that includes not attacking a very popular Republican governor in Georgia over the weekend. I'm curious, though, if when you talk about young people feeling gaslit about the economy, is some of that related to employment where we've seen a big increase in part-time employment and not the same increase in full-time? Do you think there's something for people in their 20s that are showing as a healthy part of a low unemployment rate, but kind of underemployed? Is that a sensation you're seeing with your generation?
So not that. I think finding like a good paying like full-time job and also keeping it. I have a lot of friends in like the tech space, so I think that's kind of been hit over the last few years from what I've been hearing. But again, my friends have like college degrees and master's degree. I don't think that they're looking for a part-time job, and I don't
Right.
think that they deserve a part-time job. I think they deserve a good paying job. Like they didn't get like a gender degree, like major, like it was in good like study spaces. So I think that they deserve a good paying job that they don't get laid off in.
Jimmy, do you want to recruit more to the union or to the Kamala Harris or anything else?
I mean, I really do appreciate these remarks. And workers that can represent or are represented make more money than workers who are not represented. Okay, and for too many decades and generations, our national elected officials worked against unionization. Well, now Joe Biden has turned that corner, and he has made a level playing field for unions with the rest of the workforce, and he is creating good paying jobs that this young lady is talking about. Now, in a world of independent contractors who are abused, like just take the trucking industry, where you have 300,000 truckers, they lost 30,000 jobs last year alone. And why? Because they cannot get fair pay rates. And that's because they are not represented. So we need workers that choose to be represented without impediment. And the Biden administration, through their appointees at the NLRB and their policies in general, okay, you see real wage gains and real job growth in skilled trades areas where unions prevail.
Jimmy,
Tomorrow, I want to say,
I'm curious, if you don't mind, just from a point of clarification, it's the lowest percentage of union membership in the history of the country. They didn't start keeping the data in 1983, but under these 4 years, it's gone from 10.3 to 10.2 to 10.1 to now 10%. What is the statistic? I'm not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with the benefits of unions. I have opinions around it, but that's not my point to argue with you on the merits of it. I'm just wondering what you're referring to empirically about President Biden adding to the union rolls when the percentage of the working population that's a member of a union is the lowest it's ever been and gone lower every year of his presidency.
Union roles, what unions look for, okay, is not for membership building opportunities, okay? They have to create those opportunities themselves. But what Joe Biden has done is he has created good paying jobs in the chip industry. His $52 billion investment has brought chip manufacturing back to America and is basically creating tens of thousands of new jobs throughout the country. What I'm bringing out here is that for years we've had presidents that have created jobs. And how did we know that? Well, we had I know people that had 3 of those good paying jobs and still couldn't make a living. Today, if you are in a represented position in manufacturing, in construction, okay, in the public sector, your wage gains are keeping up with inflation, and you're able to take care and work with your family, and take care of your families. We need to bring that opportunity, the opportunity to organize, to all workers in all fields, in all persuasions.
Okay.
In the country of 350 million people, okay, it's very hard to raise up and down. I would say look at our demographics, and you would see that our demographics have changed dramatically under Joe Biden's administration.
I want to get to another tweet from outside Governor Walz's house, but Maura, I want to say 4 things to you. First of all, thank you for participating. I hope you'll come back often. You brought down the average age of the participants in this particular two-way somewhat substantially, and I'm grateful for that. And please tell all your friends, we're here twice a day. We'd love you to bring some folks next time and get more input from people your generation. So thank you for that. All right.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to show you a video from a reporter for WCCO, one of the network affiliates in Minneapolis, Kristen Mitchell. And this is the video. 3 Black Suburbans just rolled out of Governor Tim Walz's St. Paul residence. He's expected to attend a fundraiser for Kamala Harris in Minneapolis tonight. Now, if he were a civilian or even a member of Congress, he wouldn't have state troopers. I'm pretty sure the governor of Minnesota, like most governors, he can play it back again, have state troopers. So it's possible that the campaign or the federal government would have sent vehicles to help him out logistically to avoid the crush of presses there. But it's also possible he's about to be on the ticket, and I would say, if I were using this as a tea leaf, I would say this is a sign that he might be about to be on the ticket. All right, we'll keep watching Twitter for more, but let's bring in our next person. I'm hoping it's somebody who will ask us a question that relates to the economy, but not if you don't want to. Anthony, tell us where you're calling from, who you're supporting for president, and what's on your mind.
All right, Mark, how we doing?
Good, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm from the great state of Ohio. I'm voting for Trump. I would like to say I got a couple points for real. I would say particularly young Black, I'm 22, particularly young Black men and Hispanic men. I feel like the media is kind of like, forcing it when they saying that we just blatantly moving back to Kamala or to the left side, the Democrats. The economy, what's going on is crazy. But yeah, I just really wanted to come on, say hi.
Okay. Let me just ask you one question, then I'll open it up to other folks, see if they want to ask you a question. From what you said, it sounds like you think Trump's better for the economy than Harris would be, correct? How would you describe Vice President Harris's economic philosophy? What does she believe in to try to grow the economy?
I don't even know what she believes in. I don't even know what she believes in. Bidenomics? Is that what she?
Yeah. How would you describe Bidenomics? Does that mean anything to you except a phrase?
Yeah, just a phrase. I mean, I just know stuff is more expensive at the grocery store.
Right. Anybody want to ask Jimmy? Anybody want to ask? Sorry, Anthony, a question? Anybody? You 3? All right. Anthony, thank you, man. Come back often. We appreciate your participation. All right. Let's go to Josh. So far, I've enjoyed everybody in my view. Josh, where are you from? Who are you supporting? What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm from North Carolina, and I'm a Trump guy.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, I don't really. I just put together who David Bonson is. Your dad is one of my heroes. So just so you know, but
mine too.
Yeah, he was awesome. But I was kind of going to say what the last guy just was talking about. It seemed to me that a lot of the media I've seen is like the African American vote is for sure going for Kamala. There's a lot of I don't know. It seemed like a lot of gaslighting, and everybody I know, all my black friends, everybody has basically said, "I'm for Trump." Like they're not even. So I'm just curious. There just seems to be a disconnect from like social media and the media, and I'm trying to understand, or I guess I'm just making a comment about that.
Did you vote for Trump in 16 and 20 also?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And if he said to you, Josh, I appreciate your what you're saying, but I want to make sure I win. I need a piece of advice. What advice would you give him to make sure he wins?
Well, I would have said, don't go for Vance to begin with.
Yeah.
I wasn't a Vance guy. I didn't like that.
What don't you like about him?
Well, I mean, I like him. I think there was better options. I mean, my idea was probably pretty weird. I wanted Tulsi Gabbard.
Hmm.
I think Tulsi Gabbard would have been an amazing pick. I think she would have been like, especially now, because anything Trump says about Kamala is immediately taken as sexist or racist or something like that, where he could just talk about policy and Tulsi could talk about,
Yeah.
she could go on the attack, basically.
Josh, let me ask you one more question. I know you prefer the Republican economic policies, but is there anything that's a traditional Democratic policy on the economy that you like more?
I mean, I didn't really get into politics much until 2016, honestly. But I haven't, if this is what the Democratic policy is, what we're going through right now, I'm not for it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
What's the thing in your life that costs more under Biden than under Trump that really gets to you?
Gas, groceries, rent has gotten insane. And that may be just a local thing in my area, but it is insane right now.
Yeah. Sarah or Jimmy, do you want to try to convert Josh over to your side, or?
You know, at the end of the day, you've got to look at policies from top to bottom and then do what's right for your family. Prices are high. There's no two ways about it. But you know, and it's inside baseball to figure out why they're high. You know, we can talk about how supply and demand play into that, how the Ukraine plays into it. But at the end of the day, it's the candidate that has the working man and woman closer to their heart that matters for people like me and the families that I once represented and am part of. So always do what's right for yourself. Always do what's right for your family. Okay, but at the end of the day, study the issues, because we can't agree with people 12 out of 12 times. But if you agree in 6 or 7 times out of 12, you're in good shape.
Josh, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining. Come back off and tell your friends. All right, here we go. Jeremy, unmute, please. Question or comment. Tell us first where you are, who you're supporting.
Thanks, Mark. I'm coming from the great swing state of New York, specifically the Yonkers district that just kicked out the incumbent Congressman Jamal Bowman, which I'm very proud of. Having just moved to the district last year and registered as a Democrat for the sole purpose of voting against him in the primary. In terms
who
of
are you supporting of the presidential?
Okay. I'm certainly not supporting the Democrats. I have twice come close to voting for Trump and not been able to pull the trigger on it. And I promised myself after his conduct after the 2020 election, I would never vote for him. And darned if especially the last couple of years has been giving me some cause to reconsider that. So I'm not sure I'm going to make my decision whether or not to vote for Trump until Election Day. I am a little comforted by the fact that my vote is unlikely to swing the state here.
If you didn't vote for Trump, would you vote for Harris or not vote?
No, never. I would never vote for absolutely not. You know, I think I have very low impressions of Harris. I will say that I live in a fairly democratic community, and that at least before the switch, a lot of people that had never voted for Trump before and if you'd ask them a year or two before, would say they never would, were seriously considering voting for Trump out of a combination of basically Biden's incapacity and horror at the anti-Semitism that has taken over a lot of the Democratic base and been more evident post October 7th, even though it dates back before that. I don't know whether the switch has really affected those people or not.
Got it. Jeremy, what's the thing you like least about Donald Trump? That causes you to be reluctant to vote for him? What do you?
I mean, how much time do we have?
Just give me number one, maybe number two.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's indiscipline, ignorance, unable to focus and resist, focus and resist the temptation to give into his worst impulses.
All right, and yet you still might vote for him.
What?
And yet you still might vote for him.
Yep.
Okay.
If you think it's a binary choice,
Yeah,
then
understood.
Yeah.
Jeremy, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Evan, thanks for joining us. I love the headphones. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, and what your question is.
I am calling from Sydney, Australia. I've been on one of your working meeting groups before. I'm voting for Harris. Lifelong Democrat, worked on the Obama campaign in 2008. I think the economy is sorry, Anthony, I think you're still on mute.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Thank you. Look, the economy, we've had the run of economic news has been pretty good over the long haul. I've seen mortgage rates go up, which have, of course, impacted us, but they're still not as high as they could have been. I think a lot of people kind of have short-term memory loss or long-term memory loss to the extent of how bad the economy was back in 2008 and 2009 and 2010 and 2011, and how bad it was for us. So I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer both in Australia, New York, and Massachusetts. And it was really difficult for even lawyers to get jobs. Tester Hurwitz, law firms were exploding and imploding during that time in 2008 and 2009. And it was a very rough time for us. I think we're in a much better place. And I think the world economy is in a much better place than it was back then. They had to deal with stress tests, and our banks were not stressed. You had mortgage-backed securities, as we've all seen the movies about it retold to us. In any case, if I was also to say what I believe in Bidenomics, I say Bidenomics is investing in the working people, investing in those in the middle class and in the lower class. You're going to have inflation as a function of Ukraine war, a function of supply chain issues. Do people not remember the Suez Canal incident in 2022, where we had that tanker that was stuck in there for like 4 weeks, and it was almost like the BP oil incident of 2009, where you had the oil kept on coming out of the Gulf of Louisiana, and there was an environmental catastrophe regarding in the Gulf of Louisiana back then. I think just people need to take a step back and take more look. Living in Australia, I have the convenience of having a wider lens and perspective on not just the US, but in the world economy. I have an Australian dollar that is now at 0.64 cents to the dollar. When I moved here, it was at parity. So I have there's a much stronger US dollar in reflection to the entire world economy. And so other economies suffer as a result of that. So I'm voting.
Let me ask, Evan, let me ask you a couple of questions. Number one, how would you rate the vice president's chances of winning the general election?
It's 50-50. Look, it's 50-50. I still give it to Trump.
And if she asked you for advice, what would you tell her? How to win?
I think, look, you have to play, you have to not worry, or you have to talk about the issue about racism, and you have to talk about economy. I think you're going to have the negative bias of racism. And living in Australia in an area which is very Jewish, I have a lot of friends who'd say, look, you can't be pro-Israel and vote for Harris. So there's that kind of disconnect that is out there. They're very pro-Zionist, and I'm a pro-Zionist as well, but I'm also a Democrat. And so those Israelis don't see how that fits together. On the economics, you can say, look, we've had interest rates high as 15% during the Carter and Reagan years. The economy is still growing. Look, the economy is never always going to be perfect for everybody. It's going to grow, and real wages have increased over time. More people are owning homes than they did back then. You can talk about the many positive indicators. Although people aren't feel it, you can have the Reagan morning in America again. I'm surprised that hasn't really shown, because once we've gotten out of COVID.
Evan, thank you. That's all right. Evan, thank you. Appreciate your joining. Good day. I want to show everybody another video. This is from a Pennsylvania reporter. This is Governor Shapiro leaving the state capitol at around 5:30 today, avoiding a group of reporters seeking an update on his status in the Veep stakes. From Tom Lehman of WGAL. You know, I don't know how to read this tea leaf. I don't know if he normally stops and talks to the press when he leaves the Capitol or not. But there's eyes on the motorcades of the two people who are said to be the last two men standing to be Kamala Harris's running mate. Thank everybody for joining, and really appreciate Jimmy Hart, who I said was a two-way pioneer back when we just started. Jimmy made some pilots with us, and always love having you on. And David Bonson and Sarah, appreciate everybody brought this peace, love, and understanding to talk about the economy. So thanks to you three and to everybody who participated. Sean Spicer and I and Tim Hogan will be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the morning meeting. I suspect we'll have some sense of who the running mate's going to be at that point. And of course, we're on watch for developments in the Middle East and to see what markets do overnight in Asia. Let's just go around. David, what do you think that Asia markets will do?
I think that they'll be positive. When you have an unwind out of the yen carry, you get a bounce back. Futures are up in U.S. markets. So you need a few days to kind of see how this settles. Ultimately, more repricing downward is coming for big tech for growth.
Okay. Sarah, you agree, disagree?
I think it's a good analysis.
Okay.
I think that's likely a little bit overdone today.
Jimmy, do you want to weigh in on that or talk about it?
It's a correction, not a calamity.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks again to all three of you. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. We'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning meeting. Have a good night.